being more like independent, but then like being with my friends at the same time, it brings us all out together. And it makes me like realise like with Mark how good it is to get out, play sports and stay inside. And it gets like your mind away from being stuck in like inside by like writing. It gets you out like doing stuff that you like achieving your goals in a way by like playing sports.
Ryan is doing well. He is doing his first belt in October, is grown in confidence and enjoying sporting activities so much more. He tries harder. I think this is largely down to the encouragement and patience that you showed him. Thank you for all the help.
I think Romeo is going to be okay. He has gained a lot of confidence, he is very fond of you and gets on well. Always comes home happy afterwards. Thank you so much for your time and consideration for my son. It means the world to both of us.
Hi, I'm Mark from Sharks Kickboxing in Taunton, and I've been coaching for 18 years and attended many seminars for training, syllabus and grading, but none on how to develop myself as a coach and role model for the juniors that I teach. From attending the SASP's Jumpstart programme, I was able to identify the needs of the juniors that I coach and how to get the best out of them, and importantly, how to resolve conflict. This has also allowed me to share my newly developed skills with the assistant coaches that work with me for a standardised approach to support coaching at this level of training. I would like to thank Somerset Activities Sports Partnership for involving me in this programme and thoroughly recommend it for all the coaches and clubs in Somerset.
Kids in the area, I think mainly for kids that come from unsupported backgrounds, is the kids that mainly come to us. They may have issues at home, whether it be parental or maybe their friends, maybe they're just not getting on in their school, but whatever it is, no matter how big or small it is, they're kind of nurtured in a way before they come to us from the Jumpstart project, and then Laura and Co, they'll bring the guys to us, and then we continue the job from there. And we're a club that's looking for boxers. We want to make boxers competitive boxers, and part and parcel with that is how we look after the kids, and we can't do, it has to come hand in hand. So and the main thing is that the kids are looked after, because for us to get the best out of them for boxing, we've got to make sure that they're fine and happy within themselves. So I'm a social worker, I'm a doctor, I'm a head teacher, I'm everything to these kids. I'm probably a parent to some of them, and I love the role that I've got. It's very important. I'm privileged to be in touch with these kids, not only in here, but I'm well in touch with all of the parents within their families, and from here on, if I can change one child's life, then that's what I want to do. I want to give them the opportunity to be able to do what other people are doing and what they're not doing, and we're making a great job of that. So yeah, everything's great.
So my name's Jane Knowles. I'm Chief Exec at Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership, and I'm really delighted and really excited to welcome you all this morning. We have a great morning with key speakers from national, local, strategic and operational, so all aspects that are all important and all need to come together. However, the stars of this morning will be the children and young people and their parents and carers who have we have worked so hard on listening to children's voices, and I'm sure that Caleb, our next speaker, who I'll introduce in a moment, will talk around that too. And to build a programme that really works for those children, but also allows them to grow in and through the programme itself, using sport as a tool for social good. And throughout this morning, you will see unedited video clips of children saying what they feel about different things around Jumpstart and the team. It's traditional to thank people, I think, at the end, but I really want to thank the kids and the parents and carers for taking part. It's been a really brave step for them, and for some of these children, really brave. They have, it's a real step of trust for them to do this. And I also want to thank some of the people who are not speaking this morning for helping us develop, fund the programme and allowing us to grow it. A particular thank you to Christy Blackwell and Children in Need, who first believed in us right at the start 3 years ago, and Leon, who you heard from earlier, he was with us right from the start. And they really believed in us and helped us start our journey. So now I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Caleb Jackson, who's the head of change from the Youth Endowment Fund, and also chief exec of the Centre for Youth Violence. So we met Caleb, and immediately after our first meeting said, please come down and talk to us in Somerset. There's a wealth of experience and just an amazing guy. So Caleb, I'm just going to hand on to you.
Morning all, and Jane, just let me know if you can hear me okay.
Yeah, I can.
Super. Thank you so much. It's not often I wear both hats in a meeting. I try to keep them separate, but here we are. And part of my role really is to influence. And it's nice to see a couple of people on the call who do other stuff with, Andy being one and the VRUs being the other. The power of children and young people in stories just, it just captivates every time. As someone who has been a practitioner working on the front lines, especially at the fringes of society with marginalized kids, getting a kid to sit down and tell us what you did is not no easy feature. But equally, for many of us who aren't working with kids on a daily basis, is a reminder into the story of the individuals, how shy they are in front of a camera, how most times they can't really tell their own story, how they struggle with those things, and actually just kind of points home that the types of individuals that SASF is already working with, and the importance of understanding their journey. And thank you so much for presenting the child's view, because as Greta is teaching us all, when you include children, things happen, right? So I've got 20 minutes to talk to you about stuff, if you don't mind. So I'll do that. I got involved because one of the things I do and I've done in the past is done a lot of training for frontline workers and beyond around how do you recognize the early signs of youth violence, and then what you do. And a lot of that links into mobilizing strategic thought to do that. And the thing that kind of the organization I set up to do was to include children and young people in the conversation and communities, and that's pretty much the feather for it. I'm doing this on the ground level as well as other stuff in terms of my YEF at a national level, but I'm passionate about this, and I keep saying to people, I'm not sure about you, but when a kid dies on our streets anywhere in England and Wales and UK, full stop, due to knife crime or due to exploitation, it's a really sour chord for me, and kind of it makes me restless at night. And so I'm impassioned to do something greater than what I would normally do in a day job, and hence the reason why CUIVS would be born, because I realized that, okay, I think I know my stuff. Okay, I think I can influence people, and I think I can help this agenda to protect children and young people going forward. So I'll share some slides. Just the difficulty of talking and sharing slides at the same time is always the one that catches me up, but I seem to be doing okay at it at the moment. Let's blow that up. So we talked about CUIVS. Basically set that out because there's more I could do. As a human being on this planet, there's more I can do. And I've been working hard to try and do more of that. This is some of the stuff I've been involved in. So run a top 19 cohort home office program in the Northeast, which was marvelous. Many things came from that, much learning, and worked alongside a number of VRUs in my previous role to just help them mobilize local community support in places where they just couldn't reach for one reason or another, and some of the small p, big P politics, and help them through that whilst trying to galvanize this wider team as well, and worked in other places as well. So I want to talk to you about the 12 steps to mobilizing a response to some of this stuff. And for many of you, this is not an easy agenda for many responses. Let's just throw some stuff out there, especially in the world of COVID. Some young people are seen as inherently evil or inherently bad. which then will curtail what sort of response we give to those young people. And then in the main, I think it's changing ever so slowly than we would expect. There is still a negative spiel about young people generally, yet alone those involved with youth finance. And there are some journalists and media writers and editors who are trying to widen the conversation, but you imagine the general perception of these individuals is pretty negative in that respect. And I often read articles and columns and then read the responses below, and it just shows that we as a society, we ain't there yet. And that can come into our own thoughts and feelings. And I'm sure that's not the case for people on this call. But the people on the call have an opportunity to make such a huge wave of difference, but you're going to come up against some of really difficult, challenging perceptions that need changing, that sometimes are in positions of authority and sometimes not, sometimes actually frontline as well because of their viewpoint. But just wanted to caveat that in terms of generally in COVID, general crime was down, and then once lockdown had ceased, it exponentially grew up. I mean, in the London context, I think it's grew up by 84% compared to the year before COVID. So just COVID has slowed things down somewhat, but hasn't really. It's caused more of a shell. More children speak to people online, which is a real danger, because that's how a lot of this grooming episode starts in that respect. So let me talk to you about these 12 principles. I'm going to fly through them just to kind of lay down, and I'm going to land with the important part of SAF's involvement and what sport can do in this arena, and probably worth stating that one of my many hats is I love American football. I played American football at university. I was actually very good at it. Didn't make GB, so obviously not that good. Clearly in the mirror I'm good. And actually one of the things we did as part of our offer where we were in the north of Manchester was to start a little American football team, and it grew into something quite powerful actually. And we had a number of young people who had actually moved up from London, etc., and were involved in stuff and on the cusp with youth violence. And I remember working with one kid, I'm gonna call him Frank, and actually the sporting opportunity gave us a provision and a programmatic feature whilst we were doing some other things regarding his home, his life, his personal bit. And this is the kind of the golden chalice of a story. He went from kind of the street kid to Great Britain under 17s team, and it's doing really well in college, and it's off to uni soon. So I've got a heart for this sport bit because coaches and community people who run things in communities are often what I call non-protrusive, as in like we've got no agenda, and we don't have any authority, which is the greatest authority for children who want to get involved, and they're recognized as with open arms almost, and welcome with open arms in that respect. So I've got a lot of love for the sports industry, sports sector, and I think there's a lot more that sport can do in solving some of our youth finance problems, just worth noting, and certainly certain things that it will investigate a bit more. So let me just throw some stuff at you. So response really starts with animation. You'll see a lot of kind of campaigns and movements just kicking off around this youth finance exploitation, but starting here and fizzling out. I'll give you an example. Say No to Knives, or Men Against Knives was something that happened a few years ago where men wore t-shirts and said, no more, and walked around different places. The difficulty with that is it doesn't create a dent in kind of the long-term response around it. So you need a bit more. Colleagues need to start with a shared description and definition of the problem that you're seeking to work on. And understand it. So, this goes into the world of what is youth violence, what's serious violence, what are we talking about here, and come into an agreement, because then you know who to invite to the party. If you don't know what type of party is, you don't know where you're going. Involves recognizing legitimacy of grassroots community groups that may need support to flourish and may need to support to flourish is a real challenge. I'm doing this a lot lately, saying that if you've got brilliant organization and they're doing great things, what do they need to fulfill their capacity in order to fulfill a great service? and actually people like SASP and others who are working insularly in the community can get to places that most, for example, statutory services can't get to without an invite. So how do you build on that? How do you, I mean, my challenge is, it's not enough to say, oh, they're delivering a service and we're going to, you know, for example, commission them to deliver a service. Actually, I think we've got to go one step further. If the agenda of children and young people is really important, what else do they need to really stand on their own 2 feet and bring up quality evidence and impact from what they do? This stuff takes time. Time is against us always because it's always linked to resources. You look at places like America who or even Scotland, you know, that's been going on 10 years plus. So it takes time. It's not a fizzle in the sand type thing. And acknowledgement to know that it's going to take time, which is why kind of the next part is really important, because strong and genuine partnerships is what mobilizes this from across. And it's great to see representatives from all networks here in the call today. But from a strategic standpoint, you know, how can you work together, even though that your objectives may be slightly nuanced and your outputs and outcomes might be slightly nuanced too? In what way can you mobilize each other? When I say genuine partnerships, it's built on trust and relationships. And any relationship, any trusting relationship takes time. And, you know, you've got to have frank and candid conversation for the heart of what you agreed in your description as a strong part. Because as competing demands start to alleviate, you need a bit of a think tank to say, look, how do we continue to make this important? Which many of you would recognize. Faith communities have important roles to play. I'm seeing that more and more in terms of getting out and about. Different communities need different people to try and work with, and that's got to be considered. Works best when there is an infrastructure to work, and get my words out, infrastructure to work through. So it's great to see VRU representatives here. That's a great infrastructure per se. You would know that the serious violence duties come out, and it pretty much says continue what you're doing anyway, but do it better in a really brief way. And it's how does it all conjoin and link up? And I know there's a real pressure on VRUs in terms of there's kind of not knowing whether you're around next year and how that fits into priorities and so on and so forth. And so, you know, from another city I know of, which I won't mention because they're sharing some things we're doing in confidence, but like they've got a city-wide plan that's brought in by everyone, by which the VRU kind of play in and say, look, hands up, we you know whether we're here or not, this is the way things should go. I do hope VRU stay, by the way. They're a very important feature of modern day society around the youth violence agenda. The opportunities for people to get involved should be many and varied. It's wide reaching, this element, and I'll come to why that is. Because of the, you know, when colleagues talk about the public health approach, there's so many people involved in order to rectify and respond to some of this stuff, and which is why you need your key players in key positions in order to do that. From schools programs through to, you know, police targeting a certain area because that's where perpetrators are. Like, you know, there's so much that needs to happen to enable, to even informing parents as to what exploitation looks like and how to get help and what help is at the end of the phone line should they need it. And so there's so many things to kind of think about, which is why this is such a complex agenda and there isn't a fix-all. Mobilization requires effective leadership. Like, leadership is so key. People who are really focused and willing to speak out and willing to influence and all that stuff you do in the back office, that, you know, meeting with people, the coffees and all the rest of it to influence stuff that actually doesn't help levering the program to support children here and now, but in the future does, is so important. And when I say effective leadership, this is really the candid space to say, look, what are we doing for our children? I like to use the term our children. It keeps us humble in the sense that if we can view all children as our children, I think we make better choices in the main. Depends on challenging views of violence as normal and acceptable. So, you know, there's a massive kind of awareness about violence against women and girls. It's not acceptable. You know, things have to change. But you know, I'll just paint a small picture. You get a young girl get out of a vehicle with 3 blokes. People say she's a victim, poor girl. You get the same three blokes and a young boy there, and it's a very, oh, he wants to be part of it. And not that I'm, you know, gender stereotyping, but just to paint the picture that, you know, violence. I know some neighborhoods where I've worked in and talked to people, and they said, oh, that's Uppingham, it's always been like that. So it's okay for it to continue to be like that, which doesn't help anybody. And then works best when focus is on recognizing and building on community assets, which this is the main focus of what we're talking about. It's who are your players in the spaces that you need to do something about, and how they're well skilled, vested, and have the capacity to be part of your team long term to solve some of those issues. And that takes work, that takes building trust, and also takes some resource. For maximum income, that must be comprehensive. The response must be comprehensive, as I've laid out. So just wanted to share that with you as a kind of top note to things to think about whilst we venture through this morning. You will recognize this, the contextual safeguarding wheel, circle, which Dr. Carleen Furman is proudly a leader of, and I'm a big fan of her work. And the two things that are glaring obvious from my days of practice is who is doing stuff with children at harm in the community, and who is doing stuff with the children who have unmet needs that are peers. Because those are the two places that a lot of services cannot get to, which you have to be a little bit specialized, and you have to have some sort of approach and be accepted by the community to really get into those hard places. And for a long time, peers element wasn't seen as a place where familial harm was happening, and therefore, for example, youth sector organizations or coaching organizations who were in the heart of this stuff were kind of seen as an extra piece rather than a core part of delivery. So my question has always been, who is going to be the people who deliver that? When you listen to Presley from another Blake Boxing Club, and how does he fit in this respect? And I'll come to that a little bit more. But the key thing is, who are the key people in here? This is kind of the most significant gap. Whenever I speak to different places and do a bit of soul searching, this is the significant gap. Often there isn't someone operating in those places, so that the problem continues to perpetuate, and we'd go down the criminal justice route rather than the support route, which becomes a long life problem. Or actually, there are people operating there, but they're just not taken seriously. And what I mean by that is there is an understanding, but they're not seen as part of the core solution for children and young people at risk of youth violence and other stuff. So wanted to share this with you because it's just a great imagery around the public health approach, and hence the reason why it's so complex. Children with unmet needs will need more specialist services as they triage to tertiary levels. And so the public health approach says, what do you do in the bit before, and how do you de-escalate? So let's take Faye, who shared her story this morning. Actually, Faye would be, anywhere in between the primary and tertiary. And the idea is, how do we de-escalate Faye back into kind of normal life and consistent places, which saves us a fortune and actually creates less damage in children's lives going forward, because hurt people. And so this is a great way to say, okay, who are the operatives in the tertiary level of children who are beyond thresholds, no one can reach, and need a specialist response in terms of the support. And the job there is to try and get them back to secondary or even down to primary or off the radar, which might take time. Same way in the secondary measure, which starts to look at just pre-threshold, just below the social care threshold. Who works with those individuals, and what do they do? And then the primary end is the early intervention, the prevention part, I would claim, which is, okay, how can we stop this from going any further? So who are the operatives within that we trust and know can support to help us long term? Because as young people slip through the net, they're more likely to end up murdering or being murdered, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to show this as a really simple diagram to say, how are we thinking about this, and where do partners play their roles? And if you don't have a partners in there, how do you find them and make sure that they're in the ilk of your long-term strategy, long-term plan? So this is some stuff I wanted to share with you, which is based on colleagues I've worked with in the past to start to open their mind on this stuff. I spoke to a chief inspector in the Northeast who said, I wish I knew this at the start of my career rather than at the end. Working with community and those who can help children can save us resources and lead to better outcomes for most children. And what he really was speaking about is I was sick and tired of locking up the same kid who was 12 and is now 24. And actually it took a lot of time, a lot of resources, and actually their life ain't no better, and kind of we're not no better apart from we've done our job, but have we really supported the society as a whole? And that becomes so that was through a program that I did then, and just kind of waking up to the fact that, oh wow, these individuals in communities can make a significant difference if we just arm them and work with them to be able to do so. A school head says, oh, we're working together as a network. We kind of previously didn't really talk to each other, but we recognized the potential exploitation of children in our neighborhoods. So we joined up. And, again, going back to that leadership strand, like schools often don't talk to each other for the nature of competition, but actually, through strength and leadership and influence came to work together, and we saw that there's a bigger problem here that we can do together depending on the area of focus. And then just having a director of children's services saying like, if we can work together, we can pool our resources, which are already finite, and really hone in on where we can make a dent in this and look at it from a long-term viewpoint. Let me just time check. Jane, just shout me how much longer I've got, because I didn't start my timer.
You probably have about 5 to 7 minutes.
Oh, super. There. Excellent. So what does good look like? Look, my other hat in my other world talks about what works around this stuff, and in that world is a very different framing. But post 2011, when the riots came up and Theresa May put together the Ending Guaranteed Youth Finance element, there was some real golden nuggets in there. Which I'll share with you. So the first one I keep talking about is strength and leadership. Leadership. Where there is no leadership, that's frontline, middle managers, senior strategic, this becomes a very difficult thing. And all of those need to be in tandem to be able to do to make any change happen for children and young people. I've talked about mapping the problem. You've got the strategic needs assessments, which I think VRUs do, and with colleagues and council and so on and so forth. And I would also say that you need a qualitative arm to that, where you go into communities and deep dive and consulting them just to marry up how things lean up. And that might do that. I don't know enough about this SNAs to speak to it. Clear assessment and referrals processes, and speaking to who are the best placed individuals or organizations to work with this child in this context. Targeted and effective interventions, and I'll talk a bit more about that. That's building on the evidence base and piloting your program to see how effective it is in terms of, because where you don't do that, value is not understood and is misunderstood easily. It's a busy world. How do you know something is doing the things that you want it to do? And research costs quite a bit. And so if the real thing here is actually for the children, they deserve the best, it's important to create a space where those things can be tested. Community mobilization, youth voice. Again, Faye powerfully shared her story this morning, and we're going to hear some more. But there's something about youth voice being able to support a change of mindset, a drumming of the heart to say, actually, we've got to do something about this. And I would say go to those who you're less likely to hear from, and those are individuals who have lived experience. Those are individuals who may have even been to prison. Go find 20, 30 individuals who are now in their 20s, who just come out or are in prison, and you go speak to them and say, look, what could we have done differently? And there's so much you can glean from that about what you do going forward, and that's time intensive, but I think it's one of the best things that places are doing. And then long-term strategy, again, youth violence can't be solved overnight. The high complexity of lives doesn't mean that here's a kid who's been a certain way, trauma, all the rest of the ACEs, or not, just bad, wrong place, wrong time, and fallen into maybe the wrong cloud or has been groomed. Here they are, and that's been consistent in their life for 3 to 5 years. And then the expectation is to turn around within a year or two, which is highly possible. But the reality is they probably need longer. And you're looking at generations deep worth of this. So if we're serious about the long-term viewpoint, it needs a long-term strategy, but equally it needs champions to really kind of spell what that looks like, and for others to support it. This leads me here, which is, I got in touch with SASP and started having a conversation and said, look, this would be great if you come and share a few things. And the thing that really hits home for me is about who are the individuals and the organizations who can reach the communities that you want to reach. And coaches and kind of sports, things that can be quite fun, are often in what I call really special places. They're uniquely placed within communities. They can do things and say things and knock on and sit in people's houses, invited, not chased out type of thing, and open arms and really report and share things. And actually they have more of the skill sets to reach the need to reach young people, what people term hard to reach, the need to reach. They can get there. Why? Because young people have in the main not engaged elsewhere, and the reason why there's a circle around that is because you can't just get to some of those young people, you can't just get to some of those communities. Actually, it's kind of funny how the SASP running person is running towards the people in the middle there, the children in the middle there, because programs like this can get there, and that is a real asset, and it's something that we still don't really understand nationally, I think. Kind of the asset-based focus, and creating real authentic relationships within communities. And then the last bit is actually, develop a theory of change, develop a logic model, develop a feasibility state in terms of evaluation and impact, because where those things don't happen, it's harder to have conversations, say that we really need this. But I say, to colleagues in the room, that it's a great potential opportunity to build the case, the business case, as to, the head case, the heart case, it makes a lot of sense. But that's not enough to get things over the line. It's got to be supported in terms of theory of change, because then on the contextual model and the complex nature of this, at least you've got some valid organizations reaching the kids you need to reach the most in this approach. I think I'm pretty much there, and I know there'll be opportunities for questions after the video, but thank you so much for listening, and hope I've done that justice the best I can. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you, Caleb. I took a few bits, and we are going to play the video, but there's a few sound bites that I loved. Hurt people, and I think that that's very true. And the more you listen to young people, you realise how true that is, and listen to the drumming of the heart. And those things really have, funnily enough, have real resonance for me. But I think some really important points made around the importance of the non-statutory services working around and alongside those statutory services to get a really holistic and partnership approach for young people, so that they get the best of all the things that we have, and actually helping communities to flourish, to really understand and help support and keep these young people safe. And also that not specialist provision, but de-escalating back into normal life, really important, really important. So Caleb, on to you. We have a question from Ronan. So Caleb, are you hearing or seeing changes in attitudes toward the safety and well-being of young people, and a willingness to take shared responsibility from faith-based organisations and places of worship particularly? Yeah,
so that is happening. I think in terms of religious institutions, the natural, the long-term, they've always been community focused, what's best for our people. I just think now we're learning that, okay, these people are really serious about seeing change happen. I think there's a lot of education still to happen, because sometimes they just can't believe that it's happening to people that might attend what they have on offer. And certainly I saw that in some parts of Birmingham, where imams were saying, yeah, listen, this is on our doorstep now, what can we do? So they're becoming alive to it, and they're being included in. I know certainly in Wakefield there's a group up there that kind of do stuff on this. There is also the awkward kind of do you do the faith-based or not, because are they promoting their religion, etc., all of that stuff. And I think my counter comment to that is, for example, County Alliance doesn't discriminate, doesn't care which background you come from, doesn't care what you believe in. It will just exploit you all the same. So I suppose that's part of just working out if there are people in your locality, if they're involved or not in the communities that you're speaking about, because often they're the gateway to communities anyway. And in terms of are people being more child first mindset, yeah, it's changing slowly, ever so slowly though. Ever so slowly, and I probably wouldn't take up more time than that. There's still a lot of work to do. And sorry, just in terms of Faye's video, you may have missed it, but really amongst the fun days out, which I wish we could swap places. If you weren't paying attention, you may have missed it, where Faye said, "Oh, I think it may be Charlotte or what another girl's name, who she's really into doing bad stuff, but she'll be all right because I am." And for me, that's a huge admonition as to not just recognizing where the child is coming from, realizing that those things that I used to be involved in are no longer normal. They're no longer normalized, and actually it's a different take. So yeah, sorry, just wanted to pull that out because we can miss that.
Thank you. There's not so much a question, but I am going to take it and make it into one, really. Jade has talked about really loving some of the need to reach rather than the hard to reach as language. And it's one of the things, Caleb, that we spoke about is actually the power of language and how we describe what we are trying to do and the young people we're doing. And I'd just like you to say a few comments on that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I really love that you guys do is you don't do referrals. You guys talk about nominations, which just takes the context of here's something kind of bad that needs fixing. But yeah, the language element is so powerful when you speak to young people. They don't like the labels, and I know we as adults we need it to kind of understand the context, but I think we've got to get beyond that and surface more positive language, and certainly things like young people need positive homes, young people need safer places to learn, although we know there's a problem within the education for that child. It just promotes a different response, and there's a lot of places who are taking a complete different approach to that, and it's not easy. And the YJB are probably leading in this area, to be honest, with their child first programs and child first approaches as well. We still don't know exactly what that means yet, but I think the next decade we may be there or thereabouts.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Caleb, a huge thank you, Caleb, for your time this morning. We've been asked if we can share your slides, so I hope that you'll be able to send them to us with your contact details. I think there might be quite some interest across the country. But
Jane, sorry, just big shout out to the I think is it the Somerset American football team. Big shout out to John and Jane. Fantastic stuff. Great to see the sport being represented here. So yeah, good stuff. I used to be part of the British American Football Association board too, so so I've got to do that because it's important to the sport. So.
Pretty close to your heart, then. Yeah, take the opportunity. Well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you very, very much. We will share the slides with everybody, and I think that Caleb has really succinctly put that power of partnership and the power of getting things right. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, see you later all. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Laura. See you later.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
So I'm going to delighted to introduce Lucy McCready, who's been a really keen supporter of Jumpstart. Lucy works for Somerset County Council as a public health specialist in community safety, has done the public health bit with the violence reduction unit, and has been a real keen supporter and keen to work with vulnerable young people in Somerset. And I remember meeting Lucy as we were starting on our journey 3.5 years ago. So Lucy, if I could hand over to you.
Hi, thank you, Jane. Can everyone see me?
Yes.
I'm not used to Zoom. I'll share some slides in a minute, but thank you for inviting me to speak. It's a real privilege, and oh my gosh, I love Faye. And it just makes everything worth it, doesn't it? So what I'm going to do today is give a bit of a boring strategic overview, really. It feels a bit boring now compared to Caleb and Faye. But what I'll be doing is kind of giving you the context and the kind of the background as to why people like me and my colleagues are keen to support Jumpstart, kind of where we've come from and the approach that we take. And I'll also talk about the Somerset Violence Reduction Unit, kind of how that's come to be, the process, how we work and who we work with, and kind of where we want to go in the future. And I guess one of the things that I'm really keen to do is get more people like Faye involved. And if they've got a voice, we want to hear it. If they want to come and work with us, if they want to have some work experience, or invite us along to do more things together, we're really keen to get the voice of the children that we work with as part of our work. So I looked at the attendance list today, and it's really nice to see people I don't know. Quite often we do these things and it's kind of the same people all the time. So hopefully it'll be news to people, some of the things I'm going to talk about. So great. So I'm going to try and share some slides. Hang on 2 seconds.
Is she co-hosting, Sarah?
I'm going to share my screen, I think.
Are you all right there, Lucy?
No, I'm trying to share my screen. I'm not sure whether it's working.
Lucy, I have got your slides if you want me to share.
Oh, yeah.
You should be able to.
Can you see that?
No.
Oh, okay.
There we go. I'll just share them for you. Do you want to just tell me when
They're
to?
slightly different to yours, but that's fine. We'll go with it. So I might just, I do tend to just chat away, and sometimes it doesn't quite match, but we'll give it a go. So if you could just go to the slide view, that'd be great. Thank you. So as Jane said, I work in public health. I'm a public health specialist at the County Council, and my portfolio is everything to do with community safety. So anything to do with crime prevention, perceptions and reality of fear. So it's a lot of different areas of work, but one of the big areas is serious violence. And that's been a relatively new agenda in terms of the national strategy, as well as the local priority that it's been given. And it seems crazy that it's something that's new. It's not new, it's been happening for years and years and years. But in terms of the investment nationally from the government about how to reduce, prevent serious violence, has only really hit the headlines and really been a big agenda for everybody, probably since about 2018. And that's following a lot of high profile cases of youth violence, in particular knife crime. So I'll kind of talk through that in a minute. But generally what I'm going to talk about is why we're interested in youth violence. I'm going to talk about the public health approach. So Caleb mentioned it earlier. I'm going to try and talk you through that a bit because it's quite important when we're talking about how to make things top priority and what things that we're looking for when we're utilising our resources, and then talk about what we're doing in Somerset. So not quite the same as what's on the screen, that's fine. So so why we're concerned, as I've already said, there's been quite a lot of high profile media cases in the last few years around youth violence in particular. And what I get really fed up with is the really bad rap that young people get. And as a violence reduction unit in Somerset, we're really keen to always say our young people in Somerset are fabulous. They are brilliant, and it's only because of bad experiences, disadvantage, inequality to why they're sometimes led down the wrong path. They're not born bad, people aren't born bad. And that's why we always take a public health approach. So what it does do, sorry, can you go back to the screen? What it does do is anytime there is a violent incident that becomes of the attention of the media, it really paints a very particular picture. You can frame it in a very particular way. So what we're keen to do is, as opposed to just taking what is in the media, on social media, what people perceive as an issue, we look at the evidence base and say, actually, what is the problem here? What is the root cause? How can we prevent it at the earliest level? And what we talk about is the burden of serious violence in public health, the global burden, the local burden, and that's about how that impacts on people's mental health and physical health, emotional health. So what I'll talk about in a bit is why we look at youth violence as a kind of a focus for us, for our violence reduction unit. But we are all age, we look at violence across all ages, but it's the youth violence bit that we're really keen to support to reduce. Okay, you can go to the next. So why a public health approach? So violence as a whole is a public health issue. When you look at other community safety crime types, they're not traditionally a public health issue, but they are moving into it. So that's why I work in public health. But violence is a public health issue because living in fear of violence is fundamentally a main factor around people's reduction in health and well-being. It also is very much linked to inequalities in health. So if you find yourself on a low income, in a state of poverty, in a deprived area, or born into a family where you are experiencing trauma, that sometimes can and probably get you to a point in your adult life where you are more susceptible to violence. And that is either most likely a victim of violence, but also as a perpetrator. So violence is a public health issue. The other point as to why it's a public health issue is because it spreads like a disease. So if you look at that image there on the screen, it can start before childhood if you are born into a violent environment. And when you start learning that behaviour, you can spread it to peers, to the community, to other people. So it spreads. And that's what we look at in public health, how you can stop the spread of infection of viruses and disease. So that's how we treat it. But what that means is that it's preventable and it's not inevitable. Okay, we can move to the next one. So in public health, we look at the protective factors and the risk factors. So when we are talking about violence, serious violence, we look at it from an individual level through to a societal level. So what is the culture? How do we perceive violence? And as we've talked about earlier, quite often the media will perceive violence in a very particular way that then spreads into our society. And that's why you get this fear of young people, this fear of town centres and certain environments, because it's perpetuated. It's not necessarily based on fact. So we always look at the evidence base, we look at the facts and say, what is the issue? So at an individual level, it could be trauma, as we said, individual trauma. It could be brain injury as a child. It could be based on your gender, your protected characteristics. They could all become risk factors. So what we then do is look at, well, what are the protective factors? So it's about growing up in a healthy environment. It's about how you communicate with children. And it's about how to develop those healthy relationships. So that's just taking that one from the first column. And then we look at a similar thing across relationships, family, community, and society. So what we're talking about there is how do we prevent things happening in the first place? So that's how do we prevent those risk factors? But then if somebody does come through and they've got those traumas, how do we then prevent it at that later stage from escalating into that more acute side? So David was talking earlier about that triangle. It's preventing it, it's keeping people in that lower kind of universal bit without escalating up into those more expensive services that demand on us as professionals, as well as support services, and being then dependent as well long term into your adult life. Move it on now. So what I'm talking about really is upstreaming and downstreaming. That's what we talk about in public health. So this is I really like this picture because it really helps to encapsulate what we do in public health. So if you look at, you've got a stream going along or a fish, and what we try, so if you're preventing upstream, so you try to prevent the fish dropping off the edge. So public health is that gate, really. How do we stop people falling through and becoming expensive if we're looking at it in terms of resources and services? And if people do start dropping off, how do you catch them before they drop so far down that you can't pick them up and make them better? So that's what we do in public health, upstreaming and downstreaming. So this is a really good wheel. It's a bit detailed, but it's quite helpful to have. So that's why I put these slides up in a certain way. So the green bit is the upstreaming. How do we prevent things from happening in the first place? And the red bit is downstreaming. How do we prevent it escalating any further? So it's really helpful kind of wheel, if you like, when you're thinking about, when you're maybe planning an intervention or when you're planning a strategy. How do we have that balance between upstreaming and downstreaming? And how do we make people aware of that? So you look at the risk factors, the greens, and then you look at the kind of the consequences as well. So this is what we look at when we're planning our intervention. So I won't go into it in much more detail because it's a bit complicated, a bit convoluted, but it is useful for you to have. But ultimately, it's looking at those root causes. Okay, so that's the public health approach. So this now is talking about the local context. So in Somerset, there is a whole plethora of partnerships and forums, meetings and things that some of us on the call are quite entrenched in. It's kind of our day job. We go to a lot of these meetings, we have lots of conversations, and we plan what we're going to do. And ultimately, once we've had all those discussions, we end up doing things like funding Jumpstart. So what I thought would be useful to do is just give you kind of an overview really of what's happening in Somerset. So our strategic partnership for community safety, so everything that we look at around serious violence, ultimately the stopping point or the escalation point is the Safe for Somerset partnership. And so every local authority area in the country has a community safety partnership or an equivalent. Some of them are merged with other partnerships, but ultimately that is a statutory board. So we all have to have these partnerships in place. And every thematic area of work that I deal with in community safety all kind of fits into that board. And what we do at that board is create and monitor the strategy. And that partnership then links to a series of other partnerships in Somerset, which do a similar thing. So they're statutory boards, but they deal with other bits. So we've got things like health and wellbeing boards that some of you will be aware of, and also safeguarding boards. And then we have a number of subgroups as well under our board, and one of which is our violence reduction unit, which I'll talk about in a minute. I guess the important thing, if you move on from this slide, hopefully, you'll get another pop-up. There you go. So there's a number of topics or areas of work, agendas that we deal with that cross a lot of those strategic partnerships. So a lot of my role is working across and making sure that we're doing what we need to do. So for an example, a good example is child exploitation, where we know that children who are already in the safeguarding system may be exploited, and we have services that we commission. So we plan and deliver that link across to safeguarding boards, but we actually deal with that in health. So we need to make sure that those things are linked. Modern slavery, again, is very much linked to county lines and child exploitation. So, and there's a safeguarding element and there's a community safety element. So we have to make sure that we cross there. And ultimately, most of the things that we do all ultimately leading to improving lives, which is health and well-being. So as you can tell, it can be a bit convoluted, but everything that we do interlinks across different partnerships. So we need to make sure that everybody is aware. So when it comes to things like youth violence and serious violence, we need to make sure that it's on the top of the agenda, not just for me, my world, or my partnership, but also all the other strategic partnerships, because ultimately that's where the leadership is. And as Caleb said earlier, leadership is key. If people don't sign up to these agendas and making sure that they have a correct strategy and an accurate strategy that's being delivered appropriately, we can't do what we need to do in the way that we need to do it. So what we're talking about is a 4-step process. So everything that we do is about looking at what is the problem, what is the root cause, how do I identify the risk and protective factors, what I've said earlier, which are linked to that problem. Then what works is a key thing to public health. So we know what the issue is, we know what the problem is, but actually across the country and across the world, there has been a plethora of interventions and services that have already been tried and tested, and also a lot of research and academic work to help evidence the success of those. So rather than just creating something new, we always look at what works elsewhere. And then it helps us then make sure that we embed appropriate intervention. And then if that works, we do a lot of monitoring and evaluation, then we scale it up. So things like Jumpstart, we know that that's been running for a few years now. So when we look to support that, Jane was really good at giving us the evidence. How do we know that that service works? What are the kids saying to us? And we could see quite early on that that's a really good intervention to support. And then once that's in place and started to support it, we monitor that with Jane. And then if it needs to scale up, we've got the evidence there. So that's kind of basically how it works. So I'm now going to talk about the violence reduction unit. So back in 2018, the government launched a serious violence strategy. And with that came about £80 million across the country. And what they did, which was quite odd for us, is that they took data, and the data was specifically about the number or the rate of injuries presented at A&E departments due to injuries from a bladed weapon. So it's quite specific. They took the top 18 police force areas with the highest rates of that injury at A&E. And Somerset, as part of Avon and Somerset Police Force, was 18 out of that 1 to 18 in terms of rates. So we were offered funds to create a violence reduction unit. So what we have in Somerset is we have a strategic violence reduction unit, which is an Avon and Somerset wide. And then we have a spoke in each local authority area. So we have a Avon and Somerset wide violence reduction unit. And then we also have a Somerset one. There's also a Bristol, Baines, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset. So we have 5 across the force. So at the strategic level, we look at developing the evidence base together as much as possible. We look at where the gaps are, where's the escalation, and we also bid for funds as a broader VRU. And then locally, we have our funds allocated and we do the local planning. So it's all about that local evidence base. But generally what we try to do, as I said, we apply the public health approach and we look at how we can prevent serious violence. What's really interesting, as Caleb mentioned earlier, the government has just, there's a current draft out. So there's a draft serious violence duty. So it hasn't gained royal assent yet. We're looking at next year. But that's the first time I've seen legislation that specifically requires us to use the public health approach to reduce violence. So we will have next year a law that says that's the approach we have to take. So it's a really big step change. It's something that we've been doing for a number of years and we've been trying to advocate for it as much as possible. But actually to see it there in draft legislation is really quite profound, and it's a really good step forward. So what we do as a violence reduction unit is that we look at prevention, but we look at it across a spectrum. So what this slide shows you is that by working together across organisations, across, and that's public sector, that's voluntary sector, that's everything, how we work together to create change from a short term through to the long term. So it's a continuum of prevention. And within that, there may be things that need to be problem solved. So you might find that particularly when things like county lines, where you might find that we have intelligence about a particular situation in Somerset that we need to problem solve. We can't prevent it, it's already happened, but we need to stop it escalating. So there's a problem solving element. There's also the contextual safeguarding that Caleb talked about, and that's really important because what we've been able to do, and particularly working with children's social care, we do a lot of peer mapping. So it's not just about the individual, it's about what environment that individual's in. So who are their friends? Where do they go? Where do they live? What schools do they go to? Who are their families? Who are their siblings? And we create this map to try and prevent the problems happening around the individual escalating out into the community. And it's a really interesting, the contextual safeguarding meetings are really interesting because you go, oh my gosh, didn't realise somebody knew that person. And, so it's really, really good. And then throughout all of that is the public health approach. So that's what that slide is about. Okay, so the way that our violence reduction unit operates is that we use the public health approach. So the first thing is about surveillance and identifying those risk factors. So the first thing we always do is start with the evidence base and we look at the data. And we also look at we observe the conversations that's happening in other meetings, operational meetings. So some of you may know about One Team, which are multi-agency regular meetings that happen out in the most deprived areas of our communities. We also observe Team Around the School meetings. So we talk about those kids that are either creating problems or there's particular concerns about. We talk to practitioners, we talk to our colleagues in SASP and whatnot. And we also talk as much as we can to our communities to say, what is the problem? Where is that problem happening? But also, what are the softer things that you're hearing that are causing you concern that might be bubbling? So we try to get on top of things before they escalate. So that's the first stage. And then we look at, once we've got that information, are people already dealing with it? Because that's always an issue as well. There's so many, as I've seen earlier, so many different bits of our system to help support and direct resource. Quite often you'll see a problem happening or you're identifying an individual or a group, but actually there's already a host of things going on around that issue. So we need to make sure that we're not duplicating. We need to make sure that we're adding value. So that's a whole bit around prioritisation. And what we find is that we're not often dealing with those most acute individuals or families because they're already in the system and they're being appropriately dealt with. We're looking at the people kind of that fall below that. And as Caleb mentioned earlier, it's those people that don't meet the threshold, those people that are really difficult to reach. They're the ones that we focus on more than ever. So once we've got our kind of areas of concern, our individuals, our groups, our families, we then plan. What is it that we need to do? Is there already something we can tap them into? Is there a program that we already support that they could go into that we can talk about? So we make a plan about that. And then we put in interventions. So there's kind of a flow to what we do. Here's the next slide. Thank you. So the way our VRU is structured, we have PCSOs. I think you'll hear from one of our PCSOs this morning. We have PCSOs and a sergeant in the VRU, and the PCSOs are based in each district area of Somerset, and they do really excellent work about identifying people in the community. They monitor those issues and they can come up and devise things that can happen without it escalating. So they will just say, actually, this person needs to be put into this group, or I've got a really good initiative that I want to do with that person. I want to feed them into a different support system, and they can have the flexibility to get that done. We then have a data group. So all of the information that's happening locally feeds into that group, so we can get a better idea of what's happening across the county. And in that data group, we've got health colleagues, we've got the police, we've got every agency that you can think of that holds data. And our ambition is to try and improve the quality of that data analysis, so we can get better and better about identifying concerns as early as possible. And then the team do the direct delivery. So although we're doing things out in the community at that district level, we then look at what needs to be done on a broader level, what needs to be done across a district or across the county. What is the data telling us that we need to do that actually isn't being done at the moment, and try and plan for the future. So that's the kind of the 3 stages that we work in. So in our VRU, we've got a manager, we've got the police team, we've got data analysis, and we then co-opt lots of different people from different agencies into the meetings to talk about different issues. So as I should mention as well, as Caleb mentioned earlier, a big part of our work is the data and evidence collection, and the VRU has to do a serious finance needs assessment. So a strategic needs assessment is a public health approach, and it's about collecting a range of data from various sources to help evidence what we should be focusing on. So every year we need to refresh our needs assessment. And what our needs assessment said in Somerset is that actually our problems are very different to other areas. We've got a really big geographical area. We've got a lot of rurality. We've got a lot of people who are quite socially isolated, which makes them more susceptible for different types of exploitation. It might be online exploitation. It might be sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation. It could be around being radicalised for a particular narrative, which goes down the kind of terrorism route. So we've got all of these things going on. But actually, in Somerset, our priority is, and what the needs assessment told us, was actually the people that are most at risk of victimisation. So not necessarily offending, but the people in our communities that are most at risk of being victims of serious violence is our 10 to 17-year-olds. And that's why we concentrate all of our work on the younger age groups, not because we think that they're bad. As I said earlier, we think they're awesome. It's because they're most at risk, and we want to prevent them from being in situations that might impact them on that lifelong journey. So as I said, we use the data. We've got a lot of data. It's coming out of our ears. What we're trying to do is bring it together, which is quite a challenge when we've got it on lots of different systems. Anybody on this call who's from one of the statutory organisations feels the pain of trying to analyse data across different organisations. It's an absolute nightmare. So a lot of our work is just trying to bring things together. And what we use now, in the last couple of years, we've been able to use the police analytics system. They've got what they call ClickSense, and what it does is score concerns in individuals and families, and it helps predict. So rather than just responding to people that come to our attention, it's actually predicting people who look like they're starting to get into trouble, and it puts a risk score on them. So we use that as well as part of our data analysis, which is really helpful. And then we use that data to target our responses. So the interventions that we use this year for the VRU, so every year we come up with a new plan, and we target our resources in accordance to the needs assessment and our kind of strategy that falls out of that needs assessment. So the slide that you've got there just gives you an idea of the types of things that we support. So this year, lots of days of action that we do in different districts across the county. We did one in Taunton last month, which was particularly focused on knife crime. We just had a lot of people go out into the parks and just talk to young people. There was a knife amnesty or weapon amnesty, and there was just people there to provide support and advice and just be visible. We do a lot of comms work, so quite a big proportion of our investment goes into campaigns to help try and get the messages out there to people. We do a lot of work in our rural communities. And then we provide support for larger scale projects. So things like Roots, which is a child sexual exploitation service. Admit, which is professionals out in our A&E departments, working with young people as they attend A&E. We do a lot of work with schools. And Jumpstart, which is one of our key kind of projects that we support. So what we've done with Jane and the team is that data that we talk about, and we use that to help identify where we would like to see Jumpstart kind of, or the staff go to particular areas and start engaging with young people. So it kind of helps both of us in a way. I think we can use the things that we know to help allocate the resource in the right places with the right people. And there are times where we say, actually, there's these kids that we know about. We've done some contextual safeguarding, and it would be really good if we could try and encourage them to get onto Jumpstart. So it's a really good way of using the resources that we've got, and we're really proud to support it. So yeah, great. There's some references there that might help you if you're doing any work yourself. But yeah, any questions?
Sorry, I was on mute. That's brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. That's a really lovely local perspective about actually how Jumpstart sits in the system, which I think is really important for other people that are on the call that might want to think about that, because Caleb also talked about the system working together, and I think that that's it. It's never one thing, it's lots of things, and so that's really important. So I'm going to hand on to Laura, who manages from SASP, who manages the Jumpstart project. So she has been inspirational in the journey. We have spent a lot of time working through this over the last 3 years, but I think that she's going to take us through some of that journey, and that's been a roller coaster ride for us.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being a part of this morning. It's something that Jane and I have been wanting to do for quite a while, and we're just so pleased and happy that you're here to share it with us. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our Jumpstart programme, kind of where it came from and the journey that it's been on, and kind of where we are now, and then get on to the really juicy parts of actually seeing more of the stories of the young people, which is really important bit. So Jumpstart is a targeted programme that supports vulnerable young people in Somerset, aged 8 to 18. It offers them an opportunity to engage in positive experiences through sport and physical activity. The programme aims to provide young people the life skills, aspirations and experiences they need to nurture strong self-esteem. It started as a pilot project in the summer of 2018, as sessions run in targeted parks as diversionary activities to help with the antisocial behaviour in the area. This initiated the start of our relationship with the police and helped us to establish that in order for this programme to have the impact we are looking for, or we were looking for, we need to make it much more targeted programme. Something that had the approach of detached youth work, but enough structure that the young people felt that they belonged to something, and so would come back each week for the club, and not just because they happened to be at the park at that time. Over time, and from the learning along the way, the programme has developed into 3 parts. So let's take a look at those 3 parts. So first of all, our Jumpstart clubs is kind of where it first started. We approached schools, safeguarding leads, PSFAs and welfare officers to let them know about the project and for them to identify young people who they felt would benefit from this programme. Those that had chaotic home lives, were struggling to stay in school, or were close to being removed from school, or those that were being quite well known in the community or by the police for kind of low-level antisocial behaviour or at risk of exploitation. We then provided an opportunity for them to come and find out more about the project. Our Jumpstart clubs provide weekly activity sessions in a supported environment where our young people feel safe and valued and have a voice. Many of the young people we work with through Jumpstart feel like they aren't listened to and that they aren't valued because of this. So it was really important to us to make sure that the young people had a voice and had choices, and that they knew that they had these things. The young people from the beginning shaped how the clubs were run. They decided on what a fair code of conduct is and what they think is important to create an environment that they feel safe in. Each week, the code of conduct comes out and has space at the bottom for everyone to sign in when they arrive to show that they agree to the code of conduct for that session. We use this as a way for each young person to decide if they deserve an incentive stamp at the end of each session. They look at the code of conduct and decide if they should or shouldn't get that stamp and reasons why. It is then a completely fair process that they have control over. The sessions are semi-structured with the option for people to chill out for a bit if they want to, chat to others, or have a one-to-one catch-up with one of the mentors if there is something that they want to get off their chest or something that has happened in that day or that week. This does mean that the sessions need to be well staffed so that the activity can continue for the group, even if a staff member is supporting a young person on a one-to-one check-in. At all of the clubs, as part of the code of conduct, it was agreed that everyone gives every activity a go before they decide whether they like it or not. That included the staff. The young people are in control of what the activities we do in a session. And if there is something that our mentors don't have a clue about, we will work with the community sports clubs and other providers in the area to bring them in and provide that for the young people. I like to think I can turn my hand to most things, but parkour and skateboarding was a bit of a stretch for me. A continuation of the club happens through the summer holidays, where we provide 2 opportunities a week for each of the areas. One is a park session and the other is an away day, to provide all of them a chance to get away from their area or their town over the summer period. This summer, as Faye mentioned earlier, trips included mountain biking to Holden Forest in Devon, skating, scooting, bouldering, graffitiing and DJing at Minehead Eye, stand-up paddleboarding at French Weir in Taunton, climbing, grass sledging and canoeing at Kilve, and a trip to the indoor trampoline park at Flip Out, all of which we consulted with our young people before planning and booking. So the second part of our Jumpstart programme is our Jumpstart Leadership Programme. And this was born from the original stipulations of the then funding provider, where each quarter we had to provide opportunity for new young people to access our provision, which due to capacity would have meant telling these vulnerable young people who were so used to services and people coming in and out of their lives that it was time for them to move on. For some, this was okay, as they were ready and comfortable to move to community sports clubs. But for others, the Jumpstart Club was the only space where they felt safe to try out sport and physical activity. Some were never going to feel safe and able to attend a sport-specific sports club. Some of these young people, such as Leon, who you've already seen, showed a real interest in taking on more of an assistant role within the club and helping out, taking the register, getting equipment out, and each week this developed a bit more. As their confidence grew, they started supporting some of the younger people in the group, taking small groups for activities. They felt good and they wanted to do more. These leaders took on these roles within the Jumpstart Club and were keen to do more. Leon, now without fail, every week at our club in Bridgewater, will get the code of conduct out each week and make sure everyone signs it as they come in. Last week he came out and found me in the car park just to make sure I'd signed in. We looked into a suitable qualification that would then take them out of their comfort zone, but in a supportive environment where they felt they could achieve. We now work with Bridgewater and Taunton College to provide them with an opportunity to gain a recognised qualification, a First for Sport level activator award. We took our first cohort back in Easter this year, and to see them grow over the Tuesdays was amazing. So take Tamsin, who you will meet after Ryan's story. She was really unsure about doing the qualification. On the fourth morning, I remember picking her up and she got into the car. She had her hood up and her face mask on. She was adamant that she was only going to stay for an hour. She made it to lunchtime, and by then she had taken her hood down and her mask off. Fast forward to the next morning and she was ready and waiting for me, telling me to hurry up. Her hair was all done and her makeup was on and she was smiling. She absolutely bossed it, and she was really proud of herself for completing the course. From doing this qualification, they are then given the opportunity to further develop their skills back at our Jumpstart clubs and also in other programmes within SASP, as we heard from Faye's story and Leon's story earlier. They volunteered over the summer in our SASP inclusion sessions, and others have helped with our adult social sports, such as walking football. Ethan is one of our young people who was nominated to us at the beginning of lockdown. He was in his last year at secondary school, very close to being excluded and not kind of gaining any qualifications. I picked him up and we started to do some one-to-one work. As that developed, he then became one of those cohorts that went on the leadership qualification in Easter. He then started volunteering at our Taunton Jumpstart Club, and he's actually now a paid member of the SASP Jumpstart team as an assistant at the sessions each week. So this part of the programme, the leadership part, has developed even further, and we're really excited that this year we've started to work with the Duke of Edinburgh to be able to offer these young people the opportunity to gain their Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award, where their 6 months of volunteering will be the volunteering that they do within the Jumpstart clubs. And we have 11 that have started this journey with us, and we are looking forward to the expedition in the Easter holidays. So the third part of the Jumpstart programme is our Jumpstart Mentor programme. Our mentors work with nominated young people on a one-to-one weekly basis. This part of the programme developed from the initial project just being the Jumpstart clubs. As the programme established momentum, other partners such as Children's Social Care, the police, PRUs, they were all nominating young people that required more individual support to start with. While we were in some way providing this one-to-one mentoring support within our Jumpstart clubs, this was a very limited to that slot each week. And there were only so many young people that we could see in that time. So we started this mentor provision. Once a young person is nominated and given a mentor, they arrange an initial meet with the young person and the person that nominated them, or the mum or dad or carer, and they go from there. They meet in the local parks, the school grounds, or anywhere public that they have space to do some activity. The aim of the sessions are to develop their trust and build a relationship, give them an opportunity to try different activities, building their confidence through these positive experiences. Over time, the mentor will look to work with the young person to identify a sports club or active group that they would like to try. And when the young person is ready, the mentor will make arrangements with the local club for them to go along and try it out. The mentor will support them in this and go along with them until the young person feels happy and comfortable to go by themselves. During this time, working towards the young person building a rapport with the Jumpstart ambassador within the community sports club, allowing the mentor to take a step back and the young person to continue in a safe and trusted environment. The time frame for this journey is very much dependent on the individual themselves. It is when they are ready, and this is very different for each individual. But giving the young person choice and options is very important to us and this project. So we've currently got 2 full-time mentors, 3 part-time mentors and 3 casual mentors for the project, and they cover the Taunton Deane area, the Sedgemoor area, South Somerset and parts of Mendip. So this is just a brief overview of the journey of the young person through the Jumpstart programme. And as I said earlier, not one journey is the same. And over the 3 years, we have learned that the process needs to be flexible in order to work for each individual. It's about giving young people a voice and a choice. We wanted to make it very clear to each individual that we work with that it isn't about one chance, and if that doesn't work, then that's it. We are committed to encouraging and supporting them to make choices for themselves. But if that doesn't work out or they don't like it, then it is okay. We just go back and we try another sport or a different club. You may have noticed, and as Caleb mentioned earlier, that we use the nomination process, not a referral. We were very clear from the beginning that we chose this language, and despite pressures to change it to referral, we were very adamant that it was a nomination process, not a referral. Sport and physical activity is for everybody, and everyone should be given the opportunity to access it. For some young people, community sports club are always going to be a struggle, which is why we have our Jumpstart clubs within the programme. So a big part of the success of the mentor programme and Jumpstart as a whole is our community clubs. Many of the young people we work with have been let down numerous times in their lives already. So what we were very keen to make sure is that the project had a sustainable element to it, so that if we no longer had funding to provide the service, the young people we had worked with wouldn't be let down again. In order for this to happen, we were very reliant on the important role that our community clubs play in our service. Without them seeing the value in what we do and supporting it, it wouldn't be the success that it has been so far. Community clubs that agree to be part of the programme do have to commit. They identify a Jumpstart ambassador within their club who is happy to give the role a go. They will be a familiar face for that young person at each session. They will provide support for the young person within the session should they need it. Perhaps they've had a crappy day and just need 5 minutes to offload or get some fresh air. They will also be that contact for the sports mentor when they take a step back and update on how the young person is getting on from a club perspective. We provide each ambassador and club with training and support to help them too. We found that some of the young people we work with have already tried sports clubs but have been kicked out as they were too badly behaved or too disruptive. What we wanted to achieve with the training for clubs was to give clubs more of an understanding that they aren't just naughty kids, but actually there is a reason why these young people are choosing to behave in that way. If we can help these clubs understand what's really going on and provide them with some tools and strategies to help them support these vulnerable young people and make the transition a positive and successful one. It's also very important for us to be able to get the young people to transfer the trust they have developed with their sports mentor into other safe people and not just be reliant on us. The other element that was highlighted to us early on in the programme was that lots of young people we work with find that children to children relationship hard, which is why many of them find the club environment a tricky one. We wanted to make sure that the training we provided for clubs would help support them with this. Just looking at that, this is the training that we provide for our community clubs that support Jumpstart and begin to be a part of that journey with us. And over time, we've developed this training for clubs, and now we feel that we've got the right mix to support them to take on the role within the Jumpstart programme. The training we ensure our clubs receive include an introduction to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. For those of you that are not aware, these are potentially traumatic events that happen to a child growing up that can have significant impact on their physical, mental, social and emotional health. They can damage a child's sense of safety, stability and bonding. We talk about the impacts that trauma can have on young people and attachment theory and the consequences of this missing from an early age and how club environments can be more trauma informed. Restorative practice is about resolving the conflict. It's about explicit practice so that there is no doubt in the adult or child's mind about what is happening, but very importantly, what is understood. This will help young people develop positive relationships with adults and importantly, other young people in the club, which, as I previously mentioned, is why our Jumpstart children find club environment hard. When we first started the training, we did 6 hours of restorative practice, but the more we used it ourselves in our own club environments, we realised that we could provide a more bespoke version of it that was completely specific to a sports club setting. With agreement from the IIRP, the International Institute of Restorative Practices, they were more than happy for us to do this. The other area is the positive discipline. We do a lot with Gillian from Coach from the Heart, based in Bath, and she does a brilliant work at informing our coaches around using a more positive discipline approach within the club. And our growth mindset, which is about giving clubs an understanding of growth mindset and how they can use this to support young people to develop more of a growth mindset, believing their talents can be developed through hard work, effort and support from others, whereas those with a more fixed mindset believe their talents are innate gifts. I can learn to do anything I want versus I'm either good or I'm not good. My ability and my efforts determine my abilities versus my potential is already predetermined. In addition to these workshops, we offer them optional workshops through the year with topics that we think they would find useful and interesting, and an opportunity to share any concerns they may be finding. So I just wanted to show you, before I pass back to Jane, in the spread of partners that nominate into Jumpstart programme. As you can see, collectively, children's social care and schools make up 70% of the nominations. But just on that point, I'd like to add in here that through the schools work that the VRU have been doing, which has been amazing, a number of the school nominations that come into us now have come as a result of the work that the VRU PCSOs are doing within those schools. I think this highlights the collaborative partnership working that we do in order to achieve what we do with Jumpstart. We started the journey with an emphasis on schools. Our thought was that this is where we needed to go to find the young people that would benefit from our work, but it soon became clear that we needed to work much more widely and with a number of partners to reach the right young people in the right way. We regularly attend multi-agency meetings, including Team Around the School, Team Around the Child, multi-agency risk panels and the One Team meetings, and we regularly meet with our VRU. I feel that we are now an integral part of these meetings and are often the go-to option for partners for high-risk, vulnerable young people. So that's kind of a round whistle-stop tour of our Jumpstart programme, and I hope it's given you a bit more of an understanding of how it works and how it's developed over the 3 years we've been running it. I'm now just going to pass back to Jane, who's just going to talk a little bit around our lessons that we've learned over those 3 years. So Jane, back to you.
Sorry, forgot I was on mute. So this was all about learning lessons, and you've heard a little bit about Laura talking about our journey. She's made that sound quite a sort of, easy journey, but honestly, we have learned so much. We have watched our language change, our understanding change. We have watched young people and things that they have said, where we've come into the office and analysed huge numbers of things that they've said and said, so what did they mean? What were they saying? What can we test out with them? So, and I can look back and I can see how far we have come. So, and it's really hard to recognise all the learning that we've done because so much is now embedded, and we can hardly remember what we didn't know before. Or perhaps, if I'm really honest, we might choose to forget some of our judgment calls that we made about some of these young people when we started, which I feel really uncomfortable about now, 3 years on. So learning obviously is a continuous process, and it's really different depending upon the lens that you look through. So you can see I put for SASP, for clubs, for organised partner organisations. But for us at SASP, it's definitely about the right people who are, and I put that first. And I know that most people would say listen to children first, but actually without the right people, we really have nothing. And people who choose to really listen to those voices again and again and actually check for understanding. And none of this would be possible without Laura or her team, who are always, I have to say, always going the extra mile. I don't know how many of you heard how many Sundays and Saturdays and evenings those mentors actually spend going to community clubs, supporting those young people, being there for their gradings, for their competitions, for a new session that they might be going to. It is far more than a job. So I did put the right people first, but it does go hand in hand with listening to children. And it's a really easy thing to say. And I always thought that I did do that, but actually listening and checking that you're listening, checking that what you heard is what they were asking for, that explicit understanding, I realised takes a whole lot more time than I ever used to give it. So it's many of these children are truly amazing. And I think, Lucy's talked about the public health approach. Really, nobody is born bad. They are amazing children. This is a very special project for us at SASP. Most of those children are absolutely amazing to still be functioning with all the trauma that some of them have experienced. And you'll hear Tamsin's story later. Sorry, this just got to me a little bit. So we've learned lots about the right training. So too much, too little, nobody ever really wants to do training, but actually the clubs have really enjoyed the stuff that they have come along to. And we have made it more and more relevant as we've learned more and got feedback from them. And we're still learning around that. Finding just funding and costs, finding costs of training fees and kit and competition fees is sometimes beyond many of these children and families, and belonging to a club, as you'll continue to hear, is really important, and without that kit they don't belong in the same way. And so a huge thank you to Rebecca Marshall and her team for helping to fund some of that for the children as they try to move into their new tribe. And we heard Grace's carer saying actually she's been able to make new friends and new relationships away from some of her less good influences sometimes. And let's face it, who doesn't love kit? And safeguarding, it's always been important to SASP. It will be important to everybody on this call. But actually, Jumpstart has challenged us as a partnership around some of the one-to-one nature of the work, but also about the amount of disclosure for staff. And we've had confidential group supervision for our mentors with an outside agency. It's completely confidential to help our staff process some of that. Because obviously there are triggers for everybody. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted, I will say that. If I just move on to some of the lessons learned for clubs, I don't really want to talk for clubs particularly, but understanding the reasons for that poor behaviour has really helped clubs be more inclusive. In the beginning video, you saw Mark talking about some of that actually how to deal with conflict differently instead of saying, why did you do that? Children often don't know why they have done something. So really important. And that's really helped coaches and adults in the club process what's going on slightly differently and understand perhaps and have some tools to deal with that. So the restorative practice work is so empowering and could be really simple and effective. Increasing resilience of kids through that growth mindset, using and language being so important around, not praising their effort and not their skill level is hugely important. And we continue to push that. And all these things are good for all children. It is good for all children. And so it's a great training and learning process. And one of the things I put is sporting ability. So every child actually really likes to be active, but not every child feels comfortable in a sports club because they don't like the level of competition, or they don't like the training, or they don't like the fact that it's just one sport. And that's why the Jumpstart clubs have evolved and continue to evolve as we go. We also know that if you're 12 and you go into a club and actually you're not very good, you're more likely to be ostracized by young people rather than brought in. And so we're really mindful about how we match, and clubs are very mindful about what they can do and how they can support those children. And for partner organisations, the role really is to provide, their role is providing long-term welfare, their schooling, their safeguarding in terms of corporate parenting and caring and all of those things. Children are really interested in the here and now. They don't think about the long term when they're in trauma, particularly. They're really only interested in what's happening to them today, tomorrow. And so working in partnership with statutory agency is really, really important because we're able to provide positive engagement in the here and now. And you heard Faye talking about Laura being the only person who listened. In actual fact, Laura was the one person that wasn't statutory, that wasn't school, that wasn't asking her to do something for her long-term future that she felt comfortable for. And through Laura, she started to be able to see a long-term future. And that's how some of this engagement works. It isn't one or the other. It is wrapping service around young people in a way in which they understand. And I don't need to say how important those new friendship groups are. So I know at a multi-agency crisis meeting for one young lad that Laura was telling me about yesterday, Jumpstart's the only thing he is engaging in at the moment. And more than that, looking forward to him. it's a different start for him and a new start for him, and we hope that we can do similar things for him as we've done for Faye. There are loads of lessons, always about sustainability. We live on year funding. We don't have long-term funding, so I live with my nails scrabbling around the cliff edge. I think Lucy put up the upstream and downstream. I think I'm always just about at the gate before we head over the waterfall. But I will never allow this programme not to happen. It is empowering to see young people develop as they should. So there's some raising aspiration, allows you to dream, allows you to fulfil your dreams. It's amazing the power of sport, the amazing of the right people in sport can be amazing for these young people. I'm going to hand on to PCSO Kim, who works in the VRU and is a really integral part of our programme. So Kim, are you there?
Morning, everyone. I'm afraid my camera isn't working, so it's just going to be audio from me. That was fantastic, seeing that video of Ryan. It's absolutely brilliant to see how his outlook's changed. It's just fantastic. So I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues in the Somerset VRU, and as a unit, we very much enjoyed working alongside SASP and being involved in the Crime Prevention 3 Sports Fund. The opportunities that are provided, including the one-to-one mentoring, the Jumpstart clubs and the Happy Healthy Holidays activities, are really invaluable to us in our approach to young people who are escalating towards a violent lifestyle, and in putting focus on prevention and that early intervention and diversion away from violence. One of the positives, and there are many, is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So each time we nominate a young person, there's discussion around what approach we're going to take, where the activity is going to take place, what they enjoy doing, or is it going to be a joint approach with the police and SASP? I really like that it's tailored to that individual and how it opens up that window of opportunity for us as the police to engage with the young people on a formal level, which allows us to grow a relationship, which then leads to conversation with the young people around potential risky behaviours. And it's these interactions which has given the young people confidence to challenge the criminal behaviours around them and to recognise the risks and the consequences. I think we're constantly trying to equip them with the tools to cope with social pressure. Laura and I have recently trialled a group session which involved a group of young ladies from a secondary school in Taunton, who we'd identified through the VRU app, so the Violence Reduction Unit app that Lucy spoke about earlier on. And that involved us mentoring them weekly at a local boxing club in Taunton. These sessions worked really well in terms of empowering the girls, influencing their behaviour and attitudes, and they're now very keen to sort of challenge criminal behaviour in their peers. They're confident in reporting crime and providing information, and they are very keen to engage in further activities. So we'll be getting them along to the Jumpstart clubs soon. It was something they weren't even aware of before, so it's, you know, they've tried new activities in terms of the boxing, and it's just really given them that confidence. So yeah, through the nomination process, a dialogue's always opened up between the young people and their families, their support networks, and the engagement that we have through SASP allows us to share the message that actually one of the main roles of the police is to support and protect the most vulnerable people in our communities. We have such great feedback from the young people and their families. Over the course of the summer, the Happy Healthy Holidays programme offered family activities. Actually, for some families, this was the first chance they had to spend that time as a family. And I know the young people are really quite overwhelmed by the opportunities that are provided to them to take part in sporting activities, to try new things, and by the enthusiasm and encouragement provided by the SASP team. I think it's given the young people a feeling that they are being heard, not only that they're being cared for by all of us as a team. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. That's amazing. And I think that, you know, you finished on the fact that it is about everybody coming together. And I've said it so many times, it is about everybody playing their part. And sport has a particular part that it can play, which allows greater safety for those young people and greater aspiration. So we are running out of time. So we do have Tamsin's story, but given that many people might need to go, I'm going to say if anybody would like to put questions in the chat, I know there are some, we will answer them to everyone, and we will send out all the slides. Some of the children's recordings we won't be able to send because the children have only consented to have them actually here and now, but we will send out the introduction video that you'll be able to see.